I'm doing entertainment, Depp vs. Heard, pop culture, things like that. This here's from Ms. More than a magazine, a moment, they say. And as you can imagine, they're heavily, heavily on Amber's side. It's from January 25th, 2023, so it's pretty new. And it says, How Johnny Depp Turned Abuse Allegations into a Comeback by Danielle Bernstein. Depp accomplished the very thing women throughout the ages have been baselessly accused of, leveraging victimhood to gain status. Well, let me just say, if you don't want status, you don't have to write an op ed in the Washington Post that's got millions and millions of followers that you know millions of other people will pick up on. If you don't want status, I mean, I'm being baseless here, but if you don't want status, you go to the police, the authorities, and you keep it as quiet as possible. You also, if you don't want status from it, you don't call TMZ and let them know exactly where you'll be and when so they could write articles. But of course, we don't want to stay in reality here. We want to play narratives. We want to play games. We don't want to see every angle. But that's just my guess about this article. What do I know? Haven't read it yet. Let's see if I'm right. By 2018, Johnny Depp was bordering on irrelevancy. That's right, Johnny was irrelevant. One of the biggest movie stars in movie history was just irrelevant by 2018, or I'm sorry, bordering on it. He was still famous, but that fame was mostly residual from his heyday as a 90s teen idol and the early aughts blockbuster Pirates of the Caribbean. By the mid 2010s, Depp's IMDb page saw far more flops than hits to the point that Variety deemed him a fallen movie star. And of course, we know whose side Variety's on. Look, careers don't always stay what they were. Obviously, Johnny had a peak, and as you get older, it's harder to find those big smash roles, but they happen here and there. And it's not like Johnny was thirsting for any more money, fame, anything. He had it already. Then, of course, they mention substance abuse, $1 million lawsuits, and a quote from The Guardian, who also leans to one side very heavily and says, It's been a long time now since Depp was cool. By Depp's account, any fall from grace he experienced could be attributed to his ex-wife Amber Heard's 2018 op-ed in the Washington Post, referring to herself as a public figure representing domestic abuse, opaquely referencing her allegation that Depp had abused her during their marriage, though never mentioning him by name. But you don't have to mention someone by name by law, because when people have a certain amount of fame, you'll know who they were talking about, and everyone did. But let's not mention the law. We don't want things like that. We want narratives and opinion here. Such was the basis of Depp's lawsuit accusing Heard of defamation, which conveniently avoided previous testimony that he had already been edged out of his role in Pirates before the op-ed was even published. I don't know. That doesn't make sense. It seems like Johnny said, and I said long before Johnny said it, to be honest, you want closure for a character. You want a torch passing. You want, a final moment in a series of 5 movies. So it's just really doubtful to me they would get rid of Johnny as Jack until they had some kind of closure and the audience was ready to move on. I mean, Johnny's fan base is still bigger than probably any single actor Warner Bros. Or Disney has right now. That's my guess. I don't know. I'm not totally up to date, but I'm sure it was, if not the biggest, probably top 5 or 10 or something. So, having said that, they'd be pretty silly to just get rid of him before there was closure for the fan base. They say that a jury in Virginia, against overwhelming evidence to the contrary, sided with Depp, because that's what most juries do. When there's overwhelming evidence, most juries just ignore that and take the side of, I guess, the cool guy. And they say he gained a tremendous fandom as the trial unfolded because Johnny didn't have a tremendous fandom. He needed the trial. He's only been making movies since the early 80s and TV shows since the early 80s. So, he needed this trial here to get that big, tremendous fan base. That sounds about right. They mentioned he was in Rihanna's Savage X Fenty, which was kind of cool. They say, no longer a has-been, Depp could be back on his way to a box office draw. The irony of that outcome is that Depp accomplished the very thing women have been baselessly accused of attempting since time immemorial, leveraging victimhood to gain status. Never seen that word, took a shot at it. Let's keep going. Since the Me Too movement took off in the fall of 2017, there have been roughly 2 tracks for men accused of various degrees of abuse or toxicity against women. And they give a few examples, including James Franco, who Amber Heard was with. Let's not mention that, of course. The other, which was taken to hold in more recent years, is essentially to ignore and outlast the accusations. Think Brad Pitt. Wait, what did Brad Pitt do? Maybe he did something. Maybe he didn't. Who knows? So why should it be negative? Depp refused to follow either playbook. Instead, he took control of the narrative, transforming the allegations against him to reshape his reputation not as a victimizer, but as a victim, resuscitating his career along the way. I recall him letting Amber pretty much off the hook for the money she owes. I mean, it was a settlement. Johnny said from the get-go it wasn't about money, and it doesn't seem like he was very concerned about getting that, 10 million. Seems like he let it go pretty easily. I don't know the huge legal details, but there was no fight for it. That's just what I'm getting. Maybe I'm wrong though. By the time he sued his ex-wife, Depp was not particularly relevant to the public writ large. They give some poll numbers, which are always trash because how many people can you actually get to answer a poll? Think about it. Maybe you get like 10,000, 20, 30, 40, maybe even get a million people to answer a poll. Hell, maybe even 2 million. I don't know. Probably not even 2 million. But the point is, polls can never be accurate because you can never actually ask everybody. You take a percentage of the answers you got and you come up with the best possible number, which could be inaccurate. So polls are fun but faulty. They say he humiliated Amber because, she never did anything to contribute to that herself, like perjury in Australia, doing something on the bed, having a history of a DUI, having some crazy photos around the net of her party and things like that. She was this very nice girl next door person, straight A student who got humiliated for no good reason. I guess that's what they want you to believe because they get into zero of her history and shortcomings at all. And that's no coincidence. They say Justice for Johnny Depp hashtag received 6 billion views on TikTok during the trial compared to a measly 21 million Justice for Amber Heard. And that's where we gotta circle back around to the overwhelming evidence. But the problem is, the overwhelming evidence was in Johnny's favor, not Amber's. That's why he got so much more positivity, not just because he's Johnny Depp. You just said he was washed up. So how could someone washed up and irrelevant get 21 billion views for positivity? They can't because they'd be washed up and irrelevant and people wouldn't know them and people would ignore the court case. But he wasn't actually washed up and irrelevant. He was Johnny Depp like usual, and that's what happened. A defamation trial presented an opportunity not only for Depp to clear his name, but also to commodify it again. Humiliating his ex-wife morphed into a tool to achieve new heights of success. That's what this was all about. Right. Johnny's scheme to get back in the game. I sense a narrative. I sense hey, kind of a conspiracy theory here if you want to get real and use some political terms that these people probably use against certain people. And of course, the article goes on and on and on. Me Too got backlash now because everyone involved is so honest. It's not that they started a movement that had flaws in it. Maybe at heart, it's a good movement. Absolutely. But the problem is the movement doesn't consider evidence. It just asks to believe, which we can't do. And they say at the end here that Amber said she can't afford to move on with any more legal process, so she has to drop the appeal. It's the saddest story I've ever heard. And we're not quite done. They mentioned that, of course, Marilyn Manson is taking Johnny's playbook and rolling with it and doing the same thing against somebody who committed a felony by forging an FBI letter and also telling a lot of lies of their own. But of course, let's not mention any of the flaws of the accusers. We wouldn't want that now. We wouldn't want a balanced factual article. We want a narrative. Well, I'm saying that with sarcasm. Obviously, we don't want a narrative. We want facts and evidence. That's it for now. Let me know what you think down below. Pretty interesting. News still coming out in Depp vs. Heard. If you're not subscribed here, I'll be covering it. Some Manson, whatever else comes up. News is kind of slow right now. And if you don't subscribe, I'll be sad, but I'll get over it. See you next time.